Hello, hello. I'm here with Steven and Elaine Bennett. So excited to talk to you both. How are you this morning?
Fine, thank you. How about you?
Doing great, doing great. It's good to see you. Good to see you. And where are you guys calling in from?
We're calling in from San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, very nice.
Yes.
Awesome. I love all the art. I can see the art behind you. Is this are these like antiques or are these contemporary art, or what is all the little
It's a little bit of both. So what you can see on the screen, the large painting behind us, I guess we can kind of show that.
oh yeah,
The
beautiful.
large painting behind us is by Xenia Hausner. Xenia is probably one of the greatest living woman painter in Austria, although she maintains a studio in both Vienna and in Berlin.
Mhm.
And then this painting behind Elaine's head, right there, thank you, Doctor, is by Suzanne Baladon,
Mhm.
who just recently had a wonderful retrospective
Mhm.
at the Barnes in Philadelphia. It was a beautiful show. And that's one of her seated nudes.
Mhm.
And then this painting here is a relatively recent acquisition. That's by Sylvia Sleigh,
Mhm.
Sleigh. Sylvia Sleigh is now dead, but she was perhaps the last of the women realists practicing in the 50s and 60s.
Mm.
And she is written about at length by the feminist art historian Linda Nochlin,
Mhm.
who wrote a number of essays about art and art history.
Mhm.
And that's called Portrait of Elaine Dufour, and Elaine is still here and going. And that
Mhm.
painting dates from the 70s.
Nice.
This painting on backwards here.
Mhm. The one by Susan Baladon.
The Susan Baladon painting is dated 1929.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I wrote something about her, actually, Susan Baladon. She was an interesting character as an
Oh, boy,
artist.
I guess.
Yeah, she had quite an interesting life. And I wrote this course for artists, and one of the I did like a section on her, and she's very interesting. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And if you're listening on the podcast, you can just look those up, or find us on the YouTube. I'll put the link in there so you can see what they're talking about. But I'm so excited to talk to you guys because I thought this would be such a great fit for this podcast, because I know so many of the listeners are contemporary realist artists who are female. Right now, 89% are female who listen to this. So, and you guys are champions of that very specific niche. And I thought this would be such an amazing opportunity to talk to you about your passion for really helping and empowering and really giving that specific niche of artists such a platform that I so appreciate, and it's so amazing. So so why don't you just introduce yourselves, and then we can talk a little bit about the prize and your collection.
Ladies first.
All right. Well, I'm Elaine Schmidt, also known as Elaine Bennett. I my first,
Wait, did I marry you?
you did
I did.
Wait, can I ask, how long have you guys been married?
7.5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, nice. All right,
So
wonderful.
we actually started to collect before we were married.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah, we did.
there's a little interesting story behind that. But my first career was I was an elementary school principal
Mhm.
and special ed teacher, second language teacher. And then I retired to marry Steve. And since then we have been working on our collection and then the prize and a few other philanthropic projects that we are engaged in.
That's right.
Amazing.
And I'm Steven Bennett. I spent my career as a lawyer and a corporate executive, but my bachelor's degree is in art history. And I had spent time as a student employee in the art gallery at the university, and one thing led to another. And when I started to approach my golden years, I said, you know, I need to get more serious about art collecting. And so some years ago, we started the Bennett Collection, which is a collection that is limited or expansive, maybe is the right word. It expands to include only the works of women by women. So every painting in the collection depicts a woman, and every painting in the collection was authored by a woman.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that for some reason. That's even more specific. I love it.
Yes, well, it makes it easy to decide what is in and what is out in terms of what we collect.
Yeah.
And so we've enjoyed being busy people with all the things that we do. We collect art. We run the Bennett Prize, kind of. Actually, somebody else runs it, but we
help.
Some would say we help, and others would say we meddle. We meddle in the Bennett Prize. We sponsor a series of lectures for artists called the Bennettschmidt Lectures on the higher aim of art, which is sponsored through the studio in Caminati in Philadelphia, which you know about, I think, and among other things.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you so much for that. Yes. Very interesting. Yeah, my dad is a lawyer. And so I'm familiar with, some law practices. I will say it's very nice to have a lawyer in the family if you're an artist, just for like contracts and stuff like that. It's fantastic. So but I'm sure you're familiar with all that. And that's very interesting that that you had an interest in art from the beginning, enough to get like your bachelor's degree in art history.
Right.
What was that like?
Yes, I've always been interested. Yeah. So.
Well, Steve hoped to be a curator at one point.
Yeah, there's a long story there, but I can cut it short. And the short is, I had a bachelor's degree in art history. I had worked as the student assistant in the art gallery at the college, and I was convinced. Pardon me. I was convinced I was headed into a career as a museum director or a curator, as the case might be. And then I was rejected, bitterly rejected. I was rejected. I had applied to the Courtauld Institute at the University of London as a graduate student in art history. And I thought I was a shoo-in, but evidently they didn't think so. And when I got rejected, I was so damn mad. I huffed off to law school and said, "The heck with it." And that's the story.
But the good news is now he has the money to buy the art.
Right, right. So there's like a reason behind everything.
Everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's really interesting. So when I graduated from PAFA, I was working as a makeup artist, and then I transitioned to an event planner for Lord and Taylor. And so I worked as like a makeup artist and then an event planner for like 10 years total. And I was always like frustrated, like, oh, I need to be like giving more of myself to my art. But really, like now that I am a full-time artist, it's amazing how much those skills helped me now, like, creating open studio events, curating exhibitions. Like I know all those organizational skills from my time in doing something corporate, and so yeah, I think that's great.
Everything lives in kind of a spiral that crosses over itself again and again. It isn't all linear. And even time's not linear. So
that's that's a topic for another podcast, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's great though. So you guys live in Texas, and is your collection in Texas as well?
Yes, this is our primary residence in San
Mhm.
Antonio, and then we have a condo in Chicago.
Okay.
So our art is split between Chicago and here, and then we have an art storage unit because
Mhm.
about 5 years ago, we outgrew our house.
Mhm.
And so
And then we loan pieces, of course, as well. And
Mhm.
we've got pieces scattered all over the globe right now that have been loaned to museums and the like.
Mhm.
We have an Artemisia painting that's currently on display at the Rijksmuseum, one of the Rijksmuseums in the Netherlands.
Wow, congratulations. That's amazing.
And
thank you.
we didn't loan this one, but we loaned a couple of other paintings to the large Xenia Hausner retrospective that was held at the Albertina
Mhm.
a year ago. And then we have a fantasy painting by Julie Bell that's traveling the country in an traveling exhibition under the auspices of the Edward Hopper
Oh, wow.
house as well. So
Our paintings travel more than we do.
yeah, well, they can't catch COVID,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They
Oh,
can't
that's
catch COVID.
funny. Oh, that's funny. That's so amazing that they're traveling all over. And art is meant to be seen, right? Not just in a storage unit. You want it to be seen. So that's great that it's traveling all over the place.
Yeah.
Now, when I was looking up the Bennett collection, I was like, man, I would love to go and see all of these. Have you guys ever thought about opening something where people can see your whole collection? Um,
Private museum.
Yeah, we've thought about a private museum, and since this is our home,
oh,
we're
right. Yeah.
currently we have decided against it. But before COVID, we've had major events where we've opened up our whole home, and
Okay.
certain
Yeah.
invited guests came through, and if you wrote us and said, I'm going to be in San Antonio, I'd like to come to your house and see your art, we would be happy to do that.
Okay. So yeah. Yeah. So maybe someday in the future, the Bennett Museum.
Or we've talked about if there was a museum that wanted to borrow 20 for an exhibition, that we would be happy to consider that.
Right.
Yeah, we're pretty open about loaning the work. Many collectors are uptight because they're afraid the work gets damaged.
Yeah.
And once you get beyond that, you're always worried that something goes wrong. But we've taken the view that owning the art is kind of a trust, right? I mean, we've been blessed with the ability to have the art, and so hoarding it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we've been very open about considering loans of the art for exhibitions and so forth. And so we're anxious for people to see it. We want people to see it. And we anticipate when we go to the big art gallery in the sky that the collection will go into the possession of a museum or a public institution or institutions. That's our intention.
Yes, that's amazing. So, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit later, is just building your legacy as an artist. Obviously, you're building your legacy as an art collector, but I'm sure most artists would love to end up in such a specific and valued collection with people who really are taking care of their art. That's always the dream, right? And the fear is somebody buys something and maybe they pass away. Their children maybe don't know the value of it and they give it to a thrift store or something. And so that's I've talked to many artists about just fearing where it ends up, So we're going to talk about building your legacy and in a valuable way in a little bit. But before we get there, I'm interested. For you, Elaine, how did you get interested in collecting art?
It's interesting. I came from a middle class background, and my mother was a teacher
Mhm.
before she had her children. And so part of growing up was going to art museums. And then I did the requisite art appreciation high school course. And then I've lived overseas twice. And
Hmm.
so that involved a lot of, architecture, art galleries. And so that was actually one of the things, was a compatibility Steve and I had. We both liked art.
Yeah,
And
we did.
even I'll tell your listeners, we met through eHarmony, and we wrote
Oh,
for
amazing.
like 14 weeks before we had our first date.
Oh, wow. Can I ask, were you living in different
I
like
was
states?
living in Plano, Texas, which is 300 miles from here. And Steve was in San Antonio, except part of our correspondence, we both like to read, we both like music, and we both like art. We would spend a lot of, before we met, talking about art. And one of the people we talked about was Hopper, and we actually had our wedding reception in Chicago at the Art Institute of Chicago, and we had our picture taken by the very Hopper we had talked about in our.
Oh, that's special.
It was special.
Yeah, it really was.
It was
It
special.
was nice.
So,
Yeah,
I think it's like art. I like part, for me, I'm a relational person, and we've met a lot of artists
Mhm.
through collecting and through the prize. And I like that. It's, people are interesting, and
Mhm.
I am not creative, so I really respect people who are.
you sell
And-
yourself short.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. You sell yourself short.
But
The most
Everybody-
creative woman I know.
oh, stop.
I
But
feel like if you like art, then there's an element to you we all have creativity within us.
It's true. It's true.
it's got to be there somewhere. And I like the narrative in art, which is part of the reason we jointly decided to collect figurative realism, because we both like the narrative or the concept behind it. We like all kinds of art and fabric and glass, etc. But the real joy of figurative realism is the story or the concept,
Mhm.
both what the artist is trying to tell as well as what we as viewers receive and unpack from it. And that makes it intellectually more stimulating, cognitively more complex than just looking at blobs of color and you
Mhm.
say, yeah, that's a pretty pattern.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that also, like, I love to marvel at the skill that it takes too. And like think about the skill, the craftsmanship also for realism is always a source of wonder for me and appreciation, because I think of the hours that went into it and like the love that went into it. And that's like another reason for me to like really love it. So
It's true.
And sometimes I'll listen to podcasts, and artists can talk about white for 2 hours,
yeah.
or black.
They can.
And as someone who's not an artist, I listen. I don't, just because
Yeah.
it's fascinating that there's
True.
such a science behind it. And
Yeah.
such
Now,
nuance.
I'm interested, do you have, as you're collecting things, besides like female artists who are painting females, what do you see any other patterns in your art collection that kind of like surprise you?
Oh, the fault lines are many. Big, small, new, old. We have some that's very hard realism and some that's impressionistic or nearly abstract. And we have called it the collection, the Bennett Collection of figurative realists, but of women figurative realists. But in truth, both real and figurative those are very broad ideas. And so we have a very broad range of acceptable work for figurative realism. If it looks like a human figure, that's probably real enough for us.
And we started with exclusively contemporary women. And then we added historical women because we thought it would help the reputations of the contemporary women if our collection was grounded in the past with some names that everybody knows.
Right.
So that was one thing we did. And then another thing, sometimes like we have a painting of a pregnant woman, we have a painting of a homeless woman, we have a painting of a special needs person. So we try, our subjects are very diverse, and that's intentional because being a woman, you are all those things, you know. We have a woman working, and you know, it's
Yeah.
celebrating. We don't have, I have to say, we don't have too many happy women.
Oh no.
And I asked an artist, and she said, because it's hard to paint a smile, but I'm thinking we could use, they're contemplative or pleased, but you don't have too many people smiling.
Well, you know, laugh out loud paintings are few and far between. The one I like to think of, I've forgotten the title of it, Leah Chapin.
Oh yes, her work is very happy.
Yeah, well, she did this great painting. I've always admired this painting of this nude middle-aged woman seated on a rock, and she's howling with laughter. She's going, "Wah!" And it's a great painting, and I'm sure she's howling at the laughing at the improbability of her seated on a rock nude.
Yeah.
It's a very happy painting, but generally speaking, you know, art doesn't spring often from mirth. It springs from something that is more serious and oftentimes more contemplative, if not sorrowful. So you tend to see a lot of paintings that are thoughtful and introspective more so, I think.
Yeah, and I think that is specifically true for the realist world, because it does seem to have a bit of a serious overtone to it, you know, because maybe that comes from its historical past, like people who, you know, were studying like in the style of the Florence Academy of Art before the Florence Academy of Art existed, like back in like the 1600s, like people didn't paint people who were smiling then because they were painting from life, and it would be impossible to just hold a smile for hours, right? So now that we have this this legacy and we're still painting in realism, maybe it's a throwback to that. I don't know.
Well, you know, realism kind of came into its own after the cave paintings. Realism focused mainly on religious themes, and you know, the history of Western art, at any rate, is the history of religion also. And if you think about whether it's the Hebrew Bible or the Christian New Testament, those are pretty serious. You don't have a bunch of incidents recounted in either of those scriptures where people are yucking it up. I mean, it's always pretty serious business.
Yeah, that's true.
And so what was the foundation, the Renaissance, even the Middle Age and before, you know, going back to the earliest of religious depictions in the Romanesque, they tend to be pretty serious, pretty serious religious themes. So I think there's a historical reason for why we don't see more.
Yeah, definitely.
More mirth in paintings.
Now,
Maybe
I have a question.
Get somebody to paint you with a laugh. I want to see you howling with laughter.
Now, I'm curious if you guys have, if each one of you can think of like maybe one or two of some of your favorite historical paintings.
Whether we own them or not?
Whether you own them or not. Yep.
Oh gosh, you know.
Well,
I'll start with one. I love the La Primavera by Botticelli. I think that's
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I could handle that.
Yeah. I love Children on the Beach by Mary Cassatt.
Oh, yes.
My favorites because I like children, I think.
Yeah.
You know, I look at some of the work. I've just got the catalog back here. the Detroit Institute of Art has got this wonderful women artists show featuring a lot of Artemisia Gentileschi. And you look at some of the work that Artemisia did. I mean, it's just, pick any one of them, really. She was just kind of a consummate artist, and really the first woman to be successful under her own name, as opposed to the name of a father or a brother, you know, ghost painting with the father or the brother signing the work. Pick any one of those and I could be very happy. If you're talking all painters over all of history, there's a couple of Hopper paintings that I'm very fond of. It's whether it's Chop Suey or New York Restaurant.
Yeah, those are classics. And he has a way of making the most mundane things incredibly fascinating. And I think it's because of like the light that he does, and then also like there's a way that it looks like a film set, like every single thing.
Well, I don't know. He has this unique way of glazing his paintings so that they glow from within almost. Everything kind of, it glows. And he has another unique thing, and that is he captures a moment in time, and you can kind of feel with his work, you feel the shutter clicking, you feel like you just stepped into it and wham, this thing has come to be. And it's interesting, he was known during his lifetime as a very silent man who was fairly humorless. He was not given to talk very much, and he wasn't a particularly mirthful person, apparently, according to my understanding. So he's one of these people who all of his soul went into his work, and maybe that's why it's so good.
Yeah, maybe there is like a charge to them. I like to say there's like a charge to his paintings where you pick them up and there's something like electric about them. And but I think that's interesting that you say that he was like very kind of like quiet and somber, because I think a lot of his paintings depict like a sense of loneliness, and not like in a sad way, more of like a just matter of fact way.
Kind of the existential idea that we're all alone in this life. And he captures that a lot. He tended to like to depict solitary women, and he did that a lot. Occasionally he would depict couples. I think one of my favorites isn't Nighthawks, but he's depicted a woman in an overcoat standing off to the side in the subdued light of a movie theater.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I can picture it. Yeah.
And she's all alone, and you wonder, is she waiting for her date to come so they can be seated? He's parking the car kind of thing, or why is she there alone? And there is that sense of she's kind of standing there in this darkened movie theater. And I thought he captured it. We don't have movie palaces like that anymore, but he kind of captured it perfectly.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff for sure. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. So I just want to move on and ask you, what made you decide to collect female contemporary realist artists in particular?
I will give the credit to Steve. We had this condo in Chicago, and there was nothing on the walls. And so at first we thought Steve made his money to go to law school by being a professional photographer. So he's got some beautiful shots, and we thought about it, enlarging them, sticking them on the wall. And then we thought check stamps because they're beautiful. And so we were thinking, we were brainstorming, right? Thinking divergently about possible options. And then Steve figured out that, women at the time were underrepresented in galleries. Their works cost less. They were equally as good as men, sometimes better, depending upon who you were comparing. And that's why we decided we liked it. We could help the cause of equity, and we could get more, honestly, for our money. Now that's changing, which is good. Because this was 10 years ago. So things have really changed for women artists since then, which is wonderful. It was our goal and objective, actually. But he still gets frustrated. He'll go to auction these days, and what 10 years ago nobody else was bidding on, now there are a lot of people bidding for the same pieces because they want dead historic women, right? I don't think it's true yet for living
not the contemporary
artists as much, but that's how we decided, and we got started, and we were very pleased with our acquisitions.
Yeah, we're still pleased with our acquisitions. I think it's fair to say that when we started collecting, and it was actually a dozen years ago or so, and when we started collecting, we had the place to ourselves. It was sort of like we're in the department store and everything's for sale and you can pick anything you want. And as time has gone on, frankly, the communities harped at the institutional art institutions, museums, public galleries, and they suddenly realized they were way behind the curve. They hadn't paid any attention to it. They had minimized the contributions of women. They had nothing in their collections, and so suddenly now they've all rushed into the market buying anything that's not nailed down. And a whole group, Big Art's full of these speculators and dealers and others who are buying up things in the hope that they can sell it for 5 times what they paid for it. So practically every historical painting now has a premium associated with it that it did not have in the past. And that's quite frankly true whether the art's any good or not. And everything's gone up if a woman is the author. So, and from our point of view, that's not bad, because part of the raison d'etre for the collection was that we would enable women to get more recognition and enable women to be recognized as capable figurists and capable realistic painters and skillful and equally competent artists in their own right. So we're grateful that things are as they are, but I guess the highest compliment an artist can pay us is if we start to collect their work and then they get so successful we can't afford it anymore. That's the highest compliment that we can be paid. And we've had a few that have taken off like rockets like that. And
that's amazing. That must be so exciting to watch too.
It is exciting to watch.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We're so pleased
for them, right?
Right.
Definitely. Oh, that's so great. So what do you see? So you're talking about like, that's so amazing that the historical artists have been able to really, raise their prices and their openness with museums and are being shown more and being auctioned more competitively. But what challenges do you see in particular for female artists today?
Oh, it's still a tough grind. If you think about what being an artist is, you spend all day in front of a flat, 2-dimensional surface and you're pouring your creativity and your soul into this, and you're alone a lot of the time, and you're waiting for somebody to recognize what you're doing as valuable and valid. And there's all these intermediaries that are filtering whether or not you can make it successfully. And so, you know, it's tough to be any kind of artist of any gender, but I think the women have it harder. They bear the children. They rule the home. You know, the traditional roles, and beyond that, it is still pretty much, despite all the hoopla about women artists and so forth, I think that it's still tilted a little bit against the women painters, you know.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, it's definitely still a boys' club. Like especially the higher, the more successful that you are, I feel like the numbers of women artists actually go down. I don't feel like it; they actually do. So, because I've looked at it, and I've definitely looked at it, but I don't know. Like for me, I've just decided that's not going to be my story. My story is not going to be that, and I'm just not going to let that define me or stop me. And I'm just going to keep believing in myself. You know, that's all you can do.
Well, I think believing in yourself, having a community that I think it's really important, and women are better at this than men. The men tend to be solitary. I think the women tend to have a better sense of community and sisterhood than the men do. There's no brotherhood of male artists for the most part. There is, however, I think a sisterhood among many women painters who root for each other and hope the best for one another and share trade secrets about their work. I'm not sure that's as true for the men. Well, the Impressionist men certainly did. They were outside.
I have another, the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood.
Fair enough. But keep in mind, those painters, it's always better to have an enemy out there. You know, the Salon was the enemy. For the Impressionists, the Salon was the enemy. So they band together and they hold their own salon. And I think that helps community, having a perceived oppressor. And it isn't just perceived for the women and for the Impressionists and for the pre-Raphaelites. It was a real oppressor. So there was strength in numbers and a community that I think it's important for women artists to band together as much as they can and help each other, because it's lonely out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a group of artists friends. There's like 6 of us in this little group, and we message each other every day, like every day. We just talk about our, what we're working on, like what we're, our projects, like questions about painting. Like it's just like a little community group, right? And these are people that I went to school with, and we're all like making our way in very different ways. But just having that sense of like somebody to talk to about like your career challenges is like so meaningful. Yeah.
I agree with that. Sure.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see here. So with the Bennett Prize, when did you guys start the Bennett Prize, and what was the idea behind that?
2015, 16, we started, we started talking about it a number of years ago, and it was the Saturday morning conversation, right? You get up, you have a cup of coffee, you're not going to work, and you look at each other and you say, I want to talk about this. I think we ought to give some thought to this. And so the Saturday morning discussions led to a decision to not just collect. You could justify spending your money just buying women artists, and you could soothe your head by saying, that's good enough. That's all I can do. We collect their work. That's good enough. But I think we wanted to go farther.
In part because as we got to know the artists and talk to them and hear their stories, I mean, everybody has struggles to make it as a full-time artist. And maybe it was because we were primarily talking to women, but it seemed like, you know, between childcare, and this was even before COVID, and, you know, the fact that women's work doesn't tend to command the prices of men's, et cetera. We thought it was another way that we could maybe help. And so we talked to some artists, and then we talked to some museum people and some gallerists, and
Got thrown out of a lot of places.
but we got lots
Really?
of ideas. We got lots
Yeah,
of ideas.
people thought we were crazy.
Well, we've come along with this.
Well, when you're starting out,
Mm-hmm.
I generally speaking, the reception for in big art, in institutional terms, museums and this sort of thing, and consider it from their point of view. You've got these people, you don't know who they are. They show up on the doorstep and they say, we've got this idea to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is before the craze for women, right? This is before the current wave of popularity. And they're all kind of shaking their heads saying, you know, we got a lot of pats on the head. Well, good luck to you folks. See you around, you know, hope it works out for you.
And I bet that now they would like love to work with you.
I think more so than in the past.
Yeah.
I don't want to overstate it. I think the Bennett Prize is still a little bit of an outsider's game rather than an insider's game. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's all right, you know. But having said all that, we have achieved or are starting to see results. The third iteration of the prize is now about to kick off. This will be the third. It's a biennial competition every 2 years. And so we held a competition that started at the call for entries opened in 2018. It was awarded in 2019. Then we had the 2021 award, and now we're about to open the call for entries for the 2023 iteration, which will be awarded in the spring of 2023. And we're starting to see all of the results that we had hoped for. Women, lots of contestants, very capable artists, and the finalists and the people who have gained recognition from the prize they've gotten higher prices, they've gotten museum shows, they've gotten into better collections, they've traveled the country and had significantly more exposure that I think has helped some. And with each successive iteration, the success of the artists who are recognized is greater and greater because the prize itself is getting traction now.
Right.
So what happens is, just for your listeners, the call for entry is about 6 months long. It opens April 18th and closes in October. And if they're interested, you can't have sold a painting for more than $25,000. The work you do, in spite of the fact that we only collect paintings of women, they can paint what men or women, whatever they want, figures. A figure has to be in the painting, but it doesn't have to be a traditional figure. If it can be identified as a human figure, then it works. And then there are 4 jurors, 2 professional artists. This time it's Zoe Frank and Julie Bell, Steve, and then Joe Rosa, who's the director of the Fry Museum in Seattle. They go through all the entries, and they will choose 10 finalists. And then the finalists will ship 3 or 4 paintings to Muskegon, Michigan, where we have our partner museum, the Muskegon Museum of Art. And the jurors fly in and actually judge in person, because as you know, seeing something online is very different than seeing it in person, because size, you know, all those different things, color, size, different.
Texture,
Yeah, and then in May, all 10 finalists, we pay for them to come to Muskegon with one family member. And the winner is announced, and she gets $50,000 over a 2-year period.
Woo, that's amazing.
It's cool. And then
Yeah.
and then she paints a solo show that 2 years later will go on a traveling exhibition.
Mhm.
And then this time, the jurors felt that it's been so hard just to choose one person that they wanted some kind of prize for the second place person. And so this time we're giving just a $10,000 award to the semifinalist, I guess
We're calling it the first runner-up.
first runner-up.
Mhm.
But the other thing I have to say, we spend money very intentionally. We have a PR firm. We promote all 10 finalists for 2 years.
Mhm.
So the PR firm, there's print, there's a lot of advertisements in print. There's a pretty good online presence. They make Animoto. So we try to promote all 10 of the finalists very actively, not just the ones who get the money.
Well said. The Bennettprize.org is where all the details are. There's actually a little radio button, complete rules for entry. You just punch that and it'll tell you everything. The only real restrictions, there's no age restriction, anybody of any age. The only thing we ask is that students are not permitted to apply only because they're distracted by their studies, and we're looking for people who want to be full-time professional artists. So can't be a student, and we ask that you live in the United States. You don't have to be a citizen, but we ask that you live in the United States most of the time when you're working, because if you win the prize, we don't want to have to deal with the problems of getting the paintings across.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Right. And that's
a nightmare.
That's the only thing that stopped us. We'd be more than happy to do an international prize, but once you say, oh, well, all my work is in fill in the blank place, you create a significant level additional level of logistic complications. So we've asked people to live in the US so that the work is produced here if they win, right?
That makes sense. Wow, that's great. And I am going to put a link directly to that in the show notes for those of you who are listening. So if you are someone who fits all those criteria, your work fits that criteria, then I definitely invite you to click that link and apply this year. Again, it's biennial, so don't lose the chance to enter this year. That'd be great.
It would be great.
We're anxious. You know, we've had now 2 completed cycles, and we've had about 700 contestants each time.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's a changing 700, but we'd be delighted to judge 7,000 entries if we could encourage people to do it. And it's always interesting. We do we ask every contestant to complete a survey after the prize is awarded. We send out a survey and we ask people what they think. And it's always interesting because I think each jury has a different view about, you know, what we say is we're interested in propelling figurative realist painting by women. And we're not too hard over about the real part of it. And we're pretty easygoing about figurative, but it's got to be the figure has to be a principal focus of the work.
And we've had photorealism.
And well, we've had photorealism, and then we've had very conceptual work that really isn't anything, very impressionistic realism. I don't know that we've had any abstract realism because I'm not sure either one of us know what that is.
Yeah, that would be a new genre. Maybe you guys can like start that.
Well, it's interesting. It's being discussed on the internet more and more as if it's a genre that is recognized. But when we do the survey, one of the things that's interesting is we'll get responses, and the responses will say things like, oh, the Bennett Prize only wants photorealism, or the Bennett Prize only wants abstract realism, or the Bennett Prize is only about nudes, and this sort of thing. And what we urge people to do, look at the work that's been recognized for among the finalists, because all of the finalists are listed on the website. The BennettPrize.org website lists every finalist for each iteration of the prize and gives an example of their work. And if you look at that work, what it would say is you can go from very hard realism to magic realism to impressionistic realism, and you can still be right. It's a pretty broad, and frankly, if you look at the work that's been traveling the country, the show is traveling around, what you find is that it's a very mixed bag.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, because I've looked at the pieces in your collection, beautiful pieces, but very, very varied. So there's like something of everything, and I think that that's great, because I agree with you, artists, it's not like, an equation where there's only one right answer. Like, the beauty of art is that we all have our own different viewpoints about how we experience life, and we want to see that beautiful kaleidoscope, right?
For sure. Another thing that comes up a lot, and it becomes a subject for every jury, and that is figuration sufficient, or must there also be narrative?
That's a good question.
It is a great question, and the answer is we've picked both. I mean, we've picked both. I think if I were counseling contestants, academic painting, wherein you are technically correct and you're doing a pure visual depiction of a figure. And there's a whole series of these artists online who do that. Probably that's great, but if you can introduce an element of narrative, what the Artsy survey says is that people buy art with narrative more readily than they buy purely visual art, right? Yeah. Purely visual impact. So we encourage people, if you have a narrative story to tell, by all means include it in the work.
That's great. Awesome. I agree with that. Yeah, and it doesn't need to be like an illustration or something like that. It can just be the suggestion of something else going on,
Well, there's even I wish I could show that painting. We've got a little watercolor here in which a bellman is in a hotel, is bringing a letter to a very, very stylish woman and handing it to her. And the name of the painting is called The Letter. And it's beautiful depiction of figuration, especially this very, very stylized woman. But the letter is just enough to create a narrative emphasis that gets the viewer to say, wonder who's sending a letter to this woman, this very stylish woman. Who's sending this letter to this woman and having it delivered by a bellman in a hotel? And is it her lover? Is it a telegram? Is it a message? What does it say? And
the intrigue. Oh, who can it be?
Well, and frankly, people love art that triggers that kind of
intrigue. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
An internal conversation that you have with yourself. What's happened here? That's
When,
really
when I've had collectors ask me like what's going on in paintings, like sometimes I'll tell them like what I was thinking, but I've learned to just be like, what do you think is happening? And oftentimes they come up with the most interesting answers that I would have never thought of. And I'm like, that may be what's happening, you know? It's interesting.
we've done that.
See?
We've asked artists to tell us what they think, and they'll all, there's a subset of them that will always say, well, what do you think? And
Yeah.
I'm thinking of one in particular, and what do you think? I said, blah, blah, blah. And she says, sure, why not?
Yeah. That's
Sure.
so funny. Yeah, so great. Well, I want to go towards some of our last questions here. And I wanted to talk a little bit about building your legacy, because I know we talked about this before the cameras were rolling, but so a lot of artists want to build their collection of their own work, and they want to see the work that goes into collectors' homes, into museums, wherever it ends up. They want to see that it's taken care of and that they're building a legacy like in the world. They're making an impact. And they're not going to just end up places where, you know, if the collector passes away, then the children just donate it to like the Salvation Army. So that's like, we don't want that to happen. So how can artists ensure that they are building a legacy and that they are collected by people who value them, even if it's not like, even if their art's not selling for like hundreds of thousands of dollars, how can they still build a legacy so that their artwork is valued and is seen in elevated spaces? Do you have any kind of advice for artists out there who would like to do that?
Dr. Schmidt? I think so. You know, some of it's blocking and tackling. So the first thing that I think we both say when artists ask questions like this is, you should keep a log. Excel spreadsheet would be a great way to do it, but you could do it in a notebook. Keep a log that contains high-res photographs of every work you make. Mm-hmm. Track how much you sold it for and track who you sold it to. And if it was sold through a gallery, the galleries don't like to tell the artist who's buying the work because they're fearful that the artist will end run the gallery and go directly to the collector to sell the work. Well, don't do that. You don't want to make your gallery mad. But I think keeping track of who's collecting your work is really important. Know where the paintings live. And I'll tell you why you want to do that. When you start to get some traction and somebody says, we want to have a show of your work and we want some of the best paintings, all of which have been sold, you're able to go to your list and see where do you go to find those paintings so that you can put them in the show, for example. So, you know, that's the first thing. Keep track of the prices. Try to raise your prices as you go. We tend to be fans of artists having galleries. You know, galleries do help artists in the sense that they get their work, they concentrate demand, they get the work in front of collectors who are interested in it. And they generally tend to push your prices up because a rising price for an artist is good for the gallery too. So make a commitment. You're not going to end run the gallery and go directly to the collector. We won't end run a gallery if an artist is represented at a gallery. And so in terms of that, you know, we occasionally get people who want to give us paintings so that they can say they're in the collection. We have never accepted a gift of a painting. One, because it would disadvantage the artist, and two, because it would then make us susceptible to anybody who wanted to give us a gift then saying they're in the collection. And the whole point of the collection is that we have curated it, right?
Right.
We've made a decision to let the work in.
Right.
So you can't really give your way into major collections, but I think you can take subtle steps to get the work in front of collectors. And once you know someone's collecting your work, the letdown that comes from being rejected causes people not to continue to show their work to somebody who says no. And I think that's a mistake. If somebody has bought your work once, keep showing them the stuff you're creating, whether through your gallery or however you're doing, even if you're selling it yourself, keep sending those messages, because your most likely second sale is to somebody who bought it the first time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I talked to a couple of museum curators, and not the top notch, not MoMA, not that level, but the mid-level museums that are good, solid community museums. The curators said they rarely get perspecti from artists for shows. And that what they recommended was to develop a professional quality, high-res photos. People slap together stuff, they'll send 5 emails. They don't want that. They want a professionally produced, either by the artist or somebody else, prospectus of their show, the number of square feet, blah, 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 their theme. And then if it's a community museum, any kinds of events that, like you might partner with a storyteller about myth, right? And have the storyteller come in. And so any kinds of things like that can involve broader,
ancillary.
like ancillary events, but also get different people in, maybe,
multidisciplinary.
And what can you do to bring children in, like those activity things. And they said,
I love it. Oh my goodness, this is such a good idea. Wow.
Well, that's what I was told, but it has to, it can't, I guess I can't emphasize this.
Homemade.
It can't be slopped together, because they don't look at that, right? They want something that's worth their time to look at, and that has a clear message, and that is has an integrity to the show. It can't just be 15 works by Elaine Schmidt. There has to be some unifying force that makes internal sense.
Right. And then I imagine that you should also target like museums or collections that already have something in common with your work.
Yes.
Yeah, better. Yeah.
Yes. And that, well, we visit a lot of museums and they have different personalities.
Yeah.
Just like different galleries have different personalities. You've got to figure out the one you might be in relationship with, or 2 or 3 or 4, and try to develop some kind of interaction with them.
I think the prospectus idea, if you're a local artist and you have a local museum and you put together a prospectus, and for those that don't know what a prospectus looks like, it usually has an opening paragraph. And the opening paragraph says, Jessica is a painter that specializes in this type of magic realistic work, and here is her bio. And this is a proposal for a show of 20 works, the theme of which is X. And in her work, Jessica explores this aspect of femininity or magic or spirituality. And then there would be thumbnails of the work with titles and dimensions and the media, and you would describe, what you think it's gonna take to show this show, right? So that a curator sitting at the desk can say, well, I've got a slot for that little gallery in the back that's empty next fall in the community museum, right? And then they read this prospectus and they say, I get to focus on a woman, I get to focus on a local artist, I get to focus on somebody whose work overlaps with our permanent collection. Any of those will work as a hook. And
wow, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And you know what I think stops a lot of ours? They don't feel that it's possible. They just feel like, oh, I don't even feel like, maybe someday I'll get to that level, but they don't actually go for it now because they don't feel like when you go to a museum, it can be intimidating, like as an artist.
well,
Yeah.
well, one of the other things I think that slows people down is if you're an artist and you're running as fast as you can to make a living, and you haven't really kept track of where your best paintings have gone, the notion of putting together a show of your best work is really problematic because you don't know where the paintings are. Right. So this goes back to the earlier point of track your work, track who's buying it, keep track of all these things, because there will come a day when you're going to want to put your 20 or 30 or 40 best paintings in a room and have a retrospective. And if you don't know where to go to get them, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would suggest is back to having a community of people who will tell you the truth. We've seen this with the prize. Sometimes artists will enter. We follow a lot of social media. So, I mean, like, we see a lot of art, and we will know that that artist has 10 better paintings that we've seen over the last 4 years. And they send in these samples, and they don't get chosen because the samples are not their best work. And that's why I think with a museum prospectus or what you're entering for a competition, have somebody that will tell you the truth. Look at it with you and give you feedback.
Having a separate voice, a trusted friend or group of friends who can tell you, no, it may be the one that's on your mind most today, but the ones that are your best are these.
Right.
That helps, because we've been amazed by painters whom we knew, whom we knew well, who submitted for the prize and then didn't use their best work to do it. And we've always puzzled over what goes through a person's mind. I think the desire is to show the most current work, because that's what's on your mind, but it may not always be your best.
Yeah. And I would add to say that it doesn't have to be an artist. Some people, like business people that I know, have had like some of the best insights that are totally outside the box because they're not even in the industry. Like I can think of, my dad has suggestions sometimes for my paintings that I'm like, oh wow, that would really work there, and like I'm just amazed. Like he has no artistic sensibility at all, but he does, when he's like giving me suggestions for paintings, if I ask for them, but yeah, it doesn't have to be another artist. Sometimes good perspectives can come outside of the art world.
Sure, absolutely. They can. So
And,
use your friends.
Yeah.
Use your friends.
Definitely. All right. And then my last question is, are there any tips for how artists can ensure their work makes the impact in the world that they hope for? Any kind of like parting advice for all the artists out there?
You go first. I have to have time to think about it.
Never pass up an opportunity to get your work shown. A lot of artists create a lot of work and they put it against the wall. And, find a gallery that's willing to show it and then put it on the wall. And then when it comes off the wall, continue to show it on social media after it's been shown at the gallery. And
Yeah, definitely.
continue to get your work in front of people that it matters to. And, you know, I can't say enough about the fact that how many studios have we visited where there'll be canvases leaning one against the other, 5 deep on on the floor, all the way around the room.
Wow.
And you say, you know, spend 75% of your time painting, and the other 25% of the time promoting, tracking, administrating, Excel spreadsheeting, doing that stuff, because make sure your work has high-res photos. Another thing we occasionally get unsolicited, even somebody will send us a picture of a painting, but you know, the angles are not square and somebody's got the painting leaning and the lighting's not very good. And it could be Picasso, but if it's poorly photographed, it really does a disservice to your promotional opportunity. So if you can't do it yourself, hire somebody to make professional photos of your work, right? Get a tripod and a nice camera and lights and put it up so that you can get a square high-res image, because a lot of business is being done that way.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's great.
And I think my advice would be to have a learning self. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, not just artists, say, I have to be true to myself. And if you think about it, we all want to be smarter, have better skill level, deeper perceptions as we go through life.
Thinner.
None of this. Thinner, rich. My husband always says, you can't be too thin or too rich. And I'll say, you can be too thin, but that's a whole other conversation. But be a learning self and a listening self. Yeah, be true to who you are, but who you are, I think, should evolve as you go through life. And
I love that.
Your practice should evolve too.
Well, I think there's another thing about the muse, and this is spins off of that. And you and I have had this conversation where you watch somebody who has a successful practice, and then they morph into, as time goes on, they back away from the thing that was very successful for them, and they start pursuing something else. And we've watched a couple of artists who had very promising careers. And we've said, we've had this conversation where we've said, well, wait, you know, this kind of thing that you're doing now is way off the path of what made you successful. And it may not be the thing to keep, if you want to keep selling paintings. Now, yeah, and you'll get people who say, well, my muse tells me to go here. Just keep in mind that your muse might not be suitable for your collector base.
That's why you have to listen, right?
That's why I'm saying this learning self has to understand that once you get successful, it's only at the highest pinnacles of success that you can start to deviate from what was successful before. You know, Picasso could become a ceramist. He could make ceramics because everybody would buy whatever he created. He could make prints. He could go off the path of painting, pure oil paint on canvas. He could do it, but only after he got successful. And there's 2 points in your career when you can get off the path. The first is when you haven't got a following, you can do whatever you want because nobody's paying
Absolutely.
any attention. And
Yeah.
when you're wildly successful up here, you can likewise go off the path because it won't matter to the people who love your work. They'll buy it anyway.
Right.
In the middle, you need to start thinking about what your brand looks like and what your
Consistency.
signature. Be consistent with your brand and the signature nature of your work.
Mm-hmm. Love it. That's great. Both of your perspectives are so different, and I love it.
We're very different people.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for this interview. I think that everyone's going to love it. I loved it. I learned so much. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And yeah, if I'm ever in Texas, I'll let you guys know. But I can't wait to, I'm going to apply for the prize this year. I'm sure a ton of people listening to this are going to apply to the prize. And so we'll definitely, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll definitely support you in that way. And yeah, anything else that you wanted to say to the artists? Oh, you can find you guys at the Bennettprize.org, right?
Yes.
Bennettprize.org, and if you'd like to see the collection, it's the Bennettcollection.com.
Okay, perfect.
You got a parting shot?
Apply.
Apply.
Yeah, we reduced the entrance fee. I think it's, well, from the first year, it's $40, so it's not horribly expensive, so give it a shot.
Keep painting. That's my advice. Keep going. Don't be discouraged. Keep going.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Steven and Elaine.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.